Hilchis mikves perik revi. Din teire shekol mayim mechunosim tevum behem. Shenemer mikve mayim mikol mokim. So the Rambam Shita is that the whole din that there has to be dafke make shamim and not mayim shuvim is only a din drabon. Midiraisa, as long as it's a mikve mayim, it's a gathering of water and has to be dafke b'teicha karka, not b'teicha keli. That's a diraisa dikadin. But the fact that the mayim doesn't have any tfisis yidei adam, that it was came through make shamim, that's not a diraisa dikadin. That's only with rabbanon dikadin. Nachamol. Din teire shekol mayim mechunosim tevum bam shenemer mikvei mayim. So we learn out mikol makom as long as it's a mikvei mayim. Aber v'hu, how big of a mikvei mayim does it have to be? Sheyeh bam kedei lahalis bam kedei tefila lechol haguf guf ha'adam b'vasachas. It has to be a big enough mikvei mayim that a regular person should be able to be toivel in it kol haguf at the whole time at the same time b'vasachas, because the din of tefila is that the entire guf has to go into b'basachas. So even if lapel you have a person that's smaller and he can go into a smaller mikveh, but nevertheless, that we learn out minatera that it has to be something. That's what the Rambam Shita is, that it has to be a place where it has to be roy to go in a person b'basachas. Shir chachamim that is an am alame b'rum shalosh amas. V'shir zeh hu amachzik arboim so b'mayim ben shuvim ben she'enum shuvim. So that's on the minateidik level, as long as it's a mikveh mayim, which is an am alame b'rum gimel amas, so it's machzik gufa adam, a regular gufa adam basachas. So that's a kosher mikveh. Now the Rambam Shita is that also Keilim, which Keilim has to go into when you have to be toivel Keilim in a kosher mikveh, it has to also be nitpal in a mikveh which is able to be machzik, the gufa, a regular gufa adam, which is an amalama, berum gimalamas, it has to be memsa. Other Rishonim, Rabbeinu Yena holds that by mayim, by Keilim, it's enough if it's a revius. As long as it's a revius and the entire Keli could go into that revius, it's also enough to be a kosher mikveh for Keilim. Alter Rebbe brings it in together, Tfilas Yadayim, which Tfilas Yadayim, but the Evid, you could be samech on this shita that just like Tfilas Keilim could be in less than Arboim so, it could be in a revius. Al there is a Tfilas Yadayim if it's in a kosher in a mikveh, which is bekarka and it's a kosher mikveh and it's a revius, so you could be tevel Yadayim b'diavad. Halacha beis midivri seifrim shahamayim hashuuvim psulim l'tfilah midrabanon. Mayim shuvim is possible to tefillah. In other words, it has to be make shamim, and not only is mayim not only mayim shuvim possible mikvah v'le'yed. Furthermore, ela mikvah mayim she'enim shuvim. If you have a mikvah which is not shuv, and shenafel l'teichen shleish lugim mayim shuvim is possible hakel. That they possible the whole thing. In other words, it's a drabon on a drabon. The whole musik that mayim shuvim is possible is also only a drabon. And over here we learn now that we'll learn Baham that if you have a mikveh which is not yet arboim so, if the mikveh has already arboim so no matter how much mayim you're moisav on this mikveh, all of this mayim becomes a kosher mikveh. Mashenkin, if the mikveh is not yet an arboim so, and then you put in shleish shaluga mayim shuvim, so not only are those shleish shaluga mayim not going to be moisav in the share of the mikveh, but nochmer they're going to passel the entire mikveh, that the whole mikveh is going to have a din of a mikveh which is a kilo like it's mayim shuvim. That's poslu akel aval bi. That's din number one. Then the Ram continues aval bi shepsul mayim shuvim is like medivri seifrim, but nevertheless lamdu behekesh. There is a limud of a hekesh for this limud. Pashtus it's not smachta. Because the Ram holds that it's a drabonon, but on the other end it's a smachta. That's the pashtus. Even though the Ram Bechlal holds that things that you learn out in Yud Milmid Shater in the Dreshes Bam is also called Medivrei Seifrim, but the Pashtus Hadvarim, he means to say that over here that it's Medivrei Seifrim, it's Kipshuti, it's a Drabonon. And he's saying that Lamdu Behekesh, knows there's an Asmachta Minatera for this din. Shari Weimer, Pasik says, Achmayon Uber Mikvi Mayim Yiator. So the Pasik says the word Mayon, and then it says Uber Mikvi Mayim. So we learn how to say, Hamayin Ein Beitvisis Yidei Odin Klal. Hamayin means a spring that comes with the shamayim. But haber in a regular bear doch kulei b'dei adam shari kulei mayim shuvim, and it says the bear next to the word mayan is amru chachamim This, and again, the Rambam is saying Amru Chacham. It's a din derabanan. It's just that it's a asmacht of this hektish. Amru Chacham hamikve leiyeh kul l'shoiv kaber, because lepel the word bear says next to mayon. Aber ve'eni tzarech li is kuli b'dei shemayim k'mayon, because sof kol sof it says bear mikve mayim. So it could be a bear. So mele and yeshbe tvisas yidei adam kosher. So it can't be kuli b'dei adam. It can be kuli b'dei adam. But on the other end, it could have a tfisas yidei adam. What does that mean? It has a tfisas yidei adam. Ketzad. Hamaniach kankanim b'reish hagag l'nakvan. Is nachman. If it would come down b'dei shemayim mamish, so it would be kuli b'dei shemayim. It would be kuli b'dei shemayim. To make sham would be similar to a mayim. If you'd go ahead and fill it up yourself, this bear, so it would be kuli b'dei adam. So now we're saying that since we're learning out of a hektish, and the hektish is that it should be doima l'mayim. So on one hand, it doesn't have to be mamish b'dei shemayim, but on the other hand, it can't be kuli b'dei adam. Ketzad hamaniach kankanim b'reish hagag l'nagvan. You put bottles on the top of a gag, of a roof, and the purpose of putting the kanim were there l'nagvam, in order for them to dry. And lepel v'yardu lehem kshamim v'nismalu. And aval pi sheyenitz ksham, so l'churi you could understand that if you're going to put water over there, l'churi you understand that it may fill up with rainwater, but you didn't have, that wasn't your kavanah. Your kavanah wasn't to fill it up with rainwater. Your kavanah was in order for it to dry, and lepel there were no ananim yet, even though it's an einetz ksham, but there was no ananim in the sky. So the din is, so that water doesn't become puzzle. That water doesn't become puzzle. So even though there's a shtickle tfisis yedei adam, there's a tfisis yedei adam because lepel, you put a bottle there, and lepel went into the bottle, but nevertheless, that's not considered a psul. So what you do is, areze yushberes kankanim, you could break the kankanim b'mkoiman, and then the water that falls out of the kankanim is kosher to be used as a mikvah, or yichpim, or you just turn over the kankanim. So again, you don't pick up the kankanim and start pouring it. You turn over the kankanim. But nevertheless, so the fact that they were bekeilim means yesh beitvisis yidei adam. But on the other end, it's not mamish tvisis yidei adam because leimilim biyadi lefichachim higbias akanim veheram. So then harikola mayim shebem shuvim. Then the mayim will have a din of shuvim. Is nachmal. Minatera, even Mei Shuvim is kosher. But Midrabanan, Mayim Shuvim is possible. Not only Mayim Shuvim is possible, but Shleish Lug Mayim Shuvim is Pesel Samikvav. It's not yet 40 so. And Lepel, there's a Hekesh. The Hekesh learns out that the pasuk says the word Mayon next to the word that Uber Mikveh Mayim. So we learn out that the Ber Mikveh Mayim has to be similar to Mayon. What's that similar? Mayon is B'dei Shemayim. Ber Be'etzim is Doch B'dei Adam. So in order for a bear mikveh mayim to be kosher, it has to have a similarity to mikveh that it's not mamish b'dei adam, but on the other end you can have a tfisas yidei adam. What's called a tfisas yidei adam? That if lepel you put bottles on top of the roof, and the purpose you put the bottles on top of the roof was lenagvan, and lepel as a result of that water came into those bottles. So that's called a tfisas yidei adam. Lepel, you had a shaykhus to it. It didn't go directly from the main ksham into the mikvah. But nevertheless, since it's lepel, it wasn't mamish, because you didn't pick it up and pour it, it's just that it fell into those bottles. So therefore, the mayim which goes into those bottles are ksherim l'tfilah. So what you have to do is either break the bottles or just turn over the bottles. Masha'enken, if you're going to pick up the bottles and then pour it, so then that mayim is going to become mayim shuvim mamish, and then it'll be possible. That's this din. So over here we're having a echatimtza that it went into a bottle, so it's not mamish completely b'dei adam, but on the there's a twisis of the adam, but on the other end it doesn't have a din of mayim shuvim. Halacha dalet. Now haminiach Keilim tachas hatzimner tamid b'cholesi b'chol zman. No matter when you put a keli under a pipe, you put a keli under the pipe. Echad Keilim ktanim, echad Keilim gdelim, afilu klei avonim u'kiyetze Mikelim she'ena mekabim tumah. You put kelim under a pipe, and lepel when the smalu make sham, and lepel through the pipe with the water make sham came down through the pipe, and it went into the keli. Is harei elipsulim, so the water that went into this pipe becomes possible. The imkafim alpiyam, even if you turned over that keli, a shimrum you broke it. So we said before that the Keilim that were on top of the roof, if you turned it over or you broke it, is Beseder. But over here, Hamayim Hanikva Mehem Kishuvim L'chol Davar. The water that comes out of those Keilim are Kishuvim L'chol Davar. Sharei L'daiti Nesmalo. Because they wouldn't Nesmalo L'daiti. When a person puts a Keilim on top of the roof, with Nagvon, so the pale, the roof, Lav Dafka, is going to be rain. Even if it's a season of rain. But the pale, Lav Dafka, there'll be rain. But when a person puts a Keilim under a pipe, over there is L'daiti Nesmalo. Shecheskes Hatziner L'kalech Mayim. Because Lepel, a tzinner is always Mekalech Mayim. It's a regular thing that from the pipe runs water. You didn't really put it under the tzinner to be placed. In other words, if a person put it under the tzinner with intent, so you could say he was intending that the water should go into the keli. Over here, he forgot the keli under the tzinner. Is nevertheless is psulim. Why? Because gozra al shechech mipnei aminech. If a person puts it under a tzinner, so then it's mamish l'daiti nismalu. So the din is that even if it was shechech under a tzinner, it has a din as if he put it under a tzinner. That's din number one. So we're learning a din that if a person took Keilim and he put it under a tzinner, even though he put it under the tzinner, amanas to take it away, and lepeli forgot it there, nevertheless, that's considered l'daiti nismalu, and the water that goes into those Keilim are considered mayim she'uvim. It's not like the Keilim that went into the water that went into the Keilim on top of the roof. V'chein, haminiachus ha-Keilim b'chotzer, be'ez kishur oven. He puts this, it's cloudy, and he puts Keilim into the chotzer, and lepel that it rained, and those Keilim were filled, so it was already cloudy at that time. So just like when you put it under a tzinner, so it's the cheskes at tzinner to go give water. So over here also, he put it into the chotzer while the chotzer was cloudy. And when the smalu is hamayim shebem sulam, sharei l'daitim nesmalu, because lepel is nedaitim nesmalu because he put it there while it was cloudy. V'chein, and that's just like we said, benegay putting it under the tzinner, even if he got it under the tzinner. So if he forgot it under the tzinner, is v'chein gozu al shecher b'chotzer mishum b'shas kisher oven. He put it in the chotzer not al menas that he wanted it to stay there. He put it there al menas to take it somewhere else, and he forgot it there. Is also in such a case. Is also, and then lepel it rained and it was filled with water. So it's also aser mishum minir because of the gzeira that he may put it there. That's din number two. So we have the din of putting a keli tachas atziner. We have a din of putting a keli in a chotzer b'shas kisher oven. Now he nichon b'chotzer b'eis pizer oven. Lepel he put it in the chotzer while there was no clouds, and lepel bo oven v'nismalu is arezu kshenim kemei. Just like when you put it on top of the gag lenagvon, so it's kosher. So over here also, when you put it on the chotzer, b'shas pizur oven, v'chein, imenichon beis kisher oven, even if you put it while there were clouds, and lepel v'nispazu, those clouds dispersed, and v'chozru v'niskashu, and then the clouds gathered again, and then v'nismalu. So mainly they weren't nismalu from the matzav of the way the clouds were there when he put it there, because the clouds dispersed, and nevertheless now it came back. Is arei luk shedim, and therefore vim shibrim we kafam. So hamayim hanikfam mem shedim. Just like when we had the jars on top of the roof. So again over there, if you broke them or you turned them over, they're kosher. So the same thing. If you had the Keilim in the chotzer, and then the clouds dispersed, and then the clouds gathered again, and it filled with water. So then that water is kosher if you go ahead and break the Keilim, or you kei for the Keilim. So b'kitzur, we're learning a din over here that if you have a Keli and you put the Keli, so we had a case where you put the Keli b'reish hagag. That was that. In such a case, l'nagvon was beseder. We had the case where you put the Keli tachas hatziner, so it's never beseder. Al derez if you put the Keli in the chotzer b'shas kisher ovim, it's also never kosher. Masha'inkin, if you put the Keli b'shas pizer ovim, or if you put the Keli b'shas kisher ovim, and then it was this pazrum b'chozim niskashu, so in such a case the water is kosher, and if you go ahead and break the Keli, or if you turn over the Keli, so that water is kosher. Halacha hey, hasayod sheshochach otzitz b'mikveh b'nismali mayim. A person, a sayid, is a person that's plastering the walls of the mikveh, and he has this Keli which he uses to fill up with plaster, so he has water and plaster. And lepel, this Keli got filled with water in the mikveh. Is afal pishali nishar b'mikveh elemaat harei ha'otzitz yesh b'reiva mikveh. And there was most of the water that was in the mikveh already like seeped into the wall. So there's not much water there, but there's water in this keli. The keli had water. So and now lepel ha'otzitz is yesh bereva mikveh. So if you're going to go ahead and break the keli, most of the water that's going to be in the mikveh is going to be from the otzitz. There's nevertheless hareze yishber is otzitz b'mkeimei and v'nimtza mikveh kuli kosher. So even though lepel, most of the water is be water that was in a keli, really till now we didn't have a problem with the fact that it was most of the water. But lepel, I mean, before we were saying that things that were in a keli has it didn't have a kosher water. But lepel, vices over here, if lepel there would be no water left in the mikveh, that's the medaik. If there would be no water left in the mikveh, and the only water that would be left would be the water in this otzitz of this sayad, so then you wouldn't be able to break this otzitz and use the water from this mikveh. Because vices, this water that's in this otzitz is not the same madrega like the water that we're learning till now that fell into the Keilim when it was nispazru from the oven or whatever. Because over here, since it was safkosaf in the mikveh and lapel, you put water in there before because you were using it in order, you wanted to have plaster. So vice says there's more of a chumrah. And therefore you could not use this water of the otzitz unless there's some water left of the mikveh itself. That's number one. And also, it has to be, by that you break the otzitz, you can't go ahead and turn over the otzitz. Before we were saying that there was an option, side of turning it over and side of breaking it. Over here, you have to break it. You have to break it. So there's two chumras in this otzitz of the sayid as opposed to the other kelim that we're learning until now. The other kelim we're learning until now could be the whole mikveh made out of those kelim, number one. And secondly, you don't have to break it. You could also turn it over. Masha'inkin over here, by this otzitz of the sayid, it can't be that the whole mikveh is made out of this water. It could be rave of the water is from this water, but it can't be all. That's number one. And also you can't turn it over, you have to break it. That's what he's saying. Areze yishber is otzitz b'mkeimei, v'nimtza mikveh kuli kosher, v'chein, ha'mesader sa'kankana b'techa mikveh kedei lachasman. Person has bottles, and he wants that the bottles, those bottles are going to be used, let's say, to put wine in it. But now when you put wine in a bottle so that the bottles absorb the wine. Masha'inkin, if you're going to soak the bottles in the water before, so those bottles are going to absorb the water through soaking in the water. So now the walls of these bottles will already be saturated and therefore won't take in any wine into the bottles. That's the purpose of doing this. In order to close them up and that they shouldn't anymore absorb the liquid that's in the bottle. And lepel, as a result of that, is the smalu mayim. The water seeped through these kankanim, and they went into the bottle. Now the bottle is filled with water. There's no water at all left in the mikveh. All the water seeped into the walls of the mikveh. And is hareze yishber es kankanim, so you still could go ahead and break the kankanim. Mikveh kosher. So over here is really more kuladik than the case of the sayat. By the case of the sayat, there's a hakpada that there should be some water left in the mikveh. It doesn't have to be most of the water. Most of the water could be in the otzitz, but there has to be some water left in the mikveh, and only then could you go ahead and break the otzitz. Masha'inkin over here, you don't have to have any water. That's what we're saying. Shamayim klal. That's on one hand, but on the other hand, it's more kuladik over here than the case of the otzitz with the sayat. But on the other hand, in the case of the bottles that were beresha hagag, we had in the chotzer when it was pazru. So over there were two eitzes. There was an eitz of breaking and there was an eitz of being kaifet. Mashenkin over here, the eitz is only to break it and not to be kaifet. So the kitzur, there could be three madregas. The madrega where you could use it all for a mikveh, and you could either turn it over or break it. You could have a situation where you could use it all for a mikveh, but you have to break it. And then you have another third situation where you can't use it all for a mikveh, and you can't turn it over. You have to break it. But on the other, that's the case. So we have the three madregas. The madrega of the first things that we learned about, the kankan and bereshagag. Then we have the second madrega of these kankan and betecha mikveh k'dei lachasman. And then we have the third madrega, which is really the beginning of halacha hey, and that's the otzitz b'mikveh. Halacha vav ketzad poislan hamayim hashum mis hamikveh v'shlei shalugim. So we learned before that shlei shalugim mayim of Mayim Shuvim, a Peslis HaMikveh. What's the, how is the Seder? She'im Hoye B'Mikveh Pachis Ma'arboim So. And then V'nafel L'Techen Shleisha Lugim V'Hishlimum L'Arboim So. And Lav Dafka L'Chori Hishlimum L'Arboim So. Who adin, if it wasn't Hishlimum L'Arboim So, is a Hariyakil Puzzle. So in other words, if Hishlimum L'Arboim So, so it's Pashat Akil Puzzle. In other words, it's not a kosher mikveh. And if it's Leishlimum L'Arboim So again, so all of this water is not considered Mei Mikveh. Like we'll learn behemshich. Aval mikveh sheyesh be'arboim so mayim she'enim shuvim, and then v'shav bekad v'shafak l'teicha koliyim kulei is kosher. So in other words, if you go ahead and you pour, if it had already arboim so, then there's no problem. V'lei eid ela mikveh elyon sheyesh be'arboim so mayim ksherim, and v'hoyim emali b'keilim v'nesin l'teicha ad sheyirbu hamayim v'yerdu mikveh atachten arboim so. So you had a mikvah of Arboim So, and you poured water into that mikvah, and now Arboim So fell out of that mikvah and came into a mikvah atachten. Is that a atachten kosher? The atachten is also kosher, because there's no problem, because Lepel, since there was Arboim So the fact that you added water to this mikvah, all that water that you added to the mikvah also becomes mikvah water. Memela, that water that pours off is all mikvah water. Now, halacha zayin, mikveh sheyesh be'arboim so mechuvanes, and then v'nosan l'teichi so ma'im shuvim, and v'not lachar kach mimenu so. You put in a so, not nosan so v'notel so. So the din is ariza kosher. V'chein nesan so v'netel so, v'hu kosher adrubi. That's adrubi. Masha'en kein, if, you did 19 times, you put in a so, 19 times you took out a so then if you're going to go ahead and you're going to take out, put in another so, and take out a so then it's going to come out that, adrubi means until that there's roiv that's there from the original mikvah. It's exact. But amis menater is not a problem. Menater is not a problem because as soon as you put in the so of mayim, so that mayim becomes mayim ksherim. And the fact that you took out a so, regardless of which so you took out. But since midrabon, it looks like Keilim, you took out the water that you put in. So if you took out roiv, if it was not nasan so and not so. So if you did that 19 times, it started with 40, so you did it with 19 times, it's not a problem. But if you did it 20 times, so there's no longer Keilu like the rave of the original mayim there, because Keilu, you took out the water that was original water, and you left the new water. So again, it's only a din d'Rabbanan, so therefore it's possible. Now it's a little bit shver l'chura. What's the difference between halacha zayin and halacha vav? And halacha vav, we're saying that if you pour water into a mikvah, into the mikveh yena, and then lepel 40 saw comes out of the mikveh yena down into the mikveh tachtena, the mikveh tachtena is kosher. Hagam lechur, it's nasan saw. You put in like 40 saw, and now you got out 40 saw, and from there's wegen the mikveh yena is kosher. Mashenkin over here, where you would nafels, notel saw, nasan saw, and notel saw, it's possible. So that's a kasha which is by the Rishonim, and the answer is that over here, the pshat, since you're putting it in and you're taking it out, so therefore there was Xer D'Rabbanan. Masha'enkin, when you pour it in all together, and then it all falls out. So that Xer D'Rabbanan isn't there because it looks like the original ones that fell in, that's what fell out. It's a little bit hard to understand. When you're pouring in and things are falling out. So pastures, the ones that were there originally is falling out. But I'll call upon the Nukuda is that when you're doing Biyada, you're putting in and you're taking out, so that when the Chazal made the Xer, Masha'enkin in its case, when things are pouring into the top one, and lepel is pouring out into the bottom one, so that gzeira is not there. Halacha ches. Eina mayim ha'she'uvim poisen samikva b'shlei shalugim, ad sheyiplu l'teich ha'mikva, that the shlei shalugim fell directly into the mikva. Ad sheyiplu l'teich ha'mikva min ha'keli. Aval em nigru ha'mayim ha'she'uvim chutz l'mikva. If the mayim ha'she'uvim were flowing on the ground outside the mikveh, they were schlepping on the ground, v'nimshechu, and v'yardu l'mikveh, that's the amshach outside the mikveh, is einam pesens ha-mikveh, is nachamol. This din of gimel lugim shuvim, gimel lugim amayim shuvim, is pesens ha-mikveh, is only if the gimel lugim went directly into the mikveh from the keilim. But if the gimel lugim went outside the mikveh, and it was schlepping on the ground, and then it went into the mikveh, so then it is einam pesens ha-mikveh, ella, if half of it is in other words, you have a mikvah of like we'll soon see of 20 saw, and then you're going to have mayim she'uvim of another 20 saw. So even though those mayim she'uvim came in through hamshach al gabi akarka, But nevertheless, it's a pasla mikvah. Masha'enkin, if you had a mikvah which is more than 20 so, and then you added mayim she'uvim into this mikvah, and that mayim she'uvim came in through amshacha, so then the mikvah is a kosher mikvah. Not only does it not pasla the mikvah, the mikvah is actually a kosher mikvah. Nachamo. Eina mayim she'uvim pesen sa mikvah b'shei shlugma at sheyiplu l'techa mikvah min ha-kelim. Avul nigru ha-mayim ha-she'uvim chutz l'mikvah v'nimshuchu v'yordi l'mikvah ein pesen sa mikvah elo ad sheyu mechze l'mechze. Avul im hoyu reiv min ha-ksherim. But if it's reiv min ha-ksherim and a mikvah kosher, the mikvah is kosher. Not only doesn't it passel, but actually this water is mashlemus ha-mikvah. Ketzad mikvah sheyesh be esem so u'mashim mayim ksherim. There's already a little bit more than 20 so in the mikvah. And now v'hoyim memala v'shei of chutz l'mikvah. And then you were filling up the mikvah outside the mikvah with mayim shuvim. V'hamayim nimshachim v'yerdin l'mikvah. Is bein shoyim nimshachim ala karka, or b'teichasilin, or in a pipe, or kiyetzebei, midvarim shein a pesach mikvah, something that doesn't have a din of a keilim. So the din is harei kosher, so the mikvah is kosher. So lapel, when you end up having arboim soy in the mikvah, the whole mikvah is kosher. Now when you add more water, so now you're adding more water to a mikvah which is already kosher. Then you can even add more water from the keli directly. Because lapel, the mikvah now became a mikvah kosher. Is nachamol. You have a mikvah. The mikvah is less than 40 so, and you pour gimel lugim mayim shuvim directly into the mikvah becomes a pasla mikvah. And you're going to have to, the whole water becomes pasla, as we'll see mahemshech. Masha'enkin, if you have a mikvah that's less than arboim so, and then you will mamshech mayim shuvim into it, not directly, but on the karka or on a siloin, and then it went into the mikvah. So if the mikvah was reiv of ksherim, the mikvah was reiv kosher, knows it had, let's say, a little bit more than 20 so, and now you will mamshech mayim shuvim, so when it reaches 40 so, it becomes a mikvah kosher. And now, when you as much mayim shuvim as you're going to put into, even if you're going to put directly from a keli, so it'll be kosher, because a mikvah that's kosher you could put in mayim shuvim. Shahashuva shimshichu ksheira only im hoyisham rei barboim som in kosher. So that's this din that if you have shuvim and you were mamshich it, and it was reiv from mamish directly from rainwater without mayim shuvim shimshichu, it's kosher. So the din that we're learning until now was that you had a kosher mikvah. You had a kosher mikvah. I mean, you had a little bit more than 20 saw of a kosher mikvah. And lapel, into that mikvah, you poured in this mayim shuvim, but you didn't pour it in directly. You poured it in through amshacha. The Rambam says the amshacha could be either al gabi karka or al gabi silon. The Rambam says that it's not good al gabi silon. It has to be on something which could absorb the karka. Therefore, it has to be al gabi karka, not al gabi silon. But al kopam, the Rambam holds it could be al gabi karka or al gabi silon as long as it's not a keilim. Now we're learning even a bigger chiddush. V'chein, gag, shahaya bereishi esem so mashu miksham. You have a roof which has esem so mashu miksham, and then umili b'kseife v'nosan l'techi pachs mi'esrim. And you went ahead and poured into this roof less than the amount of water that was there. Pachas mi'esrim. It had esrim and mashu, and now you put in pachas mi'esrim. Shenimtza. So now it's akil pasul, because lepel, you have water that was kosher and came into it, shleisha lugam mayim shuvim, which is all pasul. Now you went ahead upasach hatziner and v'nimshuch akil l'makom echad. Now there was hamshacha on all this water. Normally, when you pour water into a mikveh, so when you go pour mayim shuvim directly into the mikveh, there's not going to be hamshacha anymore, because lepel, it's in the mikveh, it's where it is, so it's already pasul. So if you had mayim shuvim and you poured it straight into the mikveh became pasul. Over here we have a hechatimtza of having water that was pasul, because the water that's on top of the gag now, since there was shleish lugam mayim shuvim, fell into the water, so it mele became pasul. But now all that water, which means the original water, which was the meik shamim and the mayim shuvim, which fell into that water, are now all nimshach. You went ahead and pasach hatzimah v'nimshach ha'kelim mokem echad. So the din is arizim mikvah kosher. So now you could go ahead and kasher this water. And even though it already became pasul, in the case that we're learning before, it never became pasul, because since it came in contact with the regular make shamim, it came in contact after there was amshacha. Over here, it came into contact with the make shamim before amshacha. It fed directly. The mayim shuvim went directly into the mayim shebegag, and it all became pasul. But now there was amshacha afterwards. and there was Amshach Sai on the Mayim Shuvim, which fell into the Meksham, and on the Meksham, which the Meksham really doesn't need Amshacha, and now Upasach Hatzina v'nimshacha Keilim Mokim Echad. So the din is Arezim Mikveh Kosher. Shehashauva sheim shichu kula, because Lepel, even though it was a sheuva, but him shichu kula ksheir. Why? Because Heil v'Hoyesham Reiv Min HaKosher. Since originally there was mostly was kosher, like we're saying, there was more than 20 saw of kosher, and then you poured directly into it Mayim Shuvim, which at that point in time they were taka all puzzle, but now that they were all nimshach, so it's all kosher. Halacha tes. Heiru mixas chachmi mayre v'amru, that Heil v'amru chacham, this lashon, she'uva shim shichu kula teira, this lashon, that she'uva shim shichu kula teira, that you will mamshich the whole mikveh that was she'uva and it became teira, is einod utzrichum she'er shomreiv mayim ksherim. They're using this lashon to say that this lashon she'uva shim shichu kula teira means that you don't have to have any mayim ksherim. V'zeh shehitzich reiv hamshachad, the one that holds that you need to have reiv of mayim make shamim, regular make shamim, and hamshach is only on the miut divrei yochadein ukvar nitchu. How do we know kvar nitchu? Shari yomru b'seiv, because the bottom line is that she'uva shim shichu kula teira. And lefi divrei zeh, if that's true, so in im hoye memale bekele v'shefech v'amayim nischol v'heilchem mokem echad is arezim mikveh kosher. So it comes out that you don't need to have any make shamim. You can have regular mayim shuvim, and that mayim shuvim through amshacha becomes a kosher mikveh. And Mamela comes out that kol ambarti sheber mechitzoy shalonu, which the seder was that the ambati was in the karka, and lepel the water came into the ambati through hamshacha al gabi karka, is mikvois ksherim. Shari kol mayim shuvim is shov. They're taka mayim shuvim, aber v'shenimshachu. It's mayim shuvim that were nimshachu. Lepel the Ram says ume'elam leireinu misha osem ma'aseh b'nizah. Ram is not sheil legamri the singing. The Ram just says leireinu misha osem ma'aseh b'nizah. And it was that timing that's the taich in mikveh that have she'uva shem shichu kula ksheira means it was mechatchila all she'uva. The Rambam taich before that she'uva shem shichu kula means that first it fell into the case of that it fell on top of the gag, and then Lepel, at that point in time, they were all puzzled. But Lepel, it was originally was rainwater, and it was only the miut was mayim shuvim, but Lepel was mayim shuvim that caused the whole thing to become puzzle. And then you went ahead and himshichu kula. You went ahead and were mamshich all of this water, but this water wasn't all originally mayim shuvim. It was originally make shamim, and you mixed in mayim shuvim, which made it puzzle. So that's so the Rambam is saying in that case, taka, it'll become kosher. That'll be the taichi she'uva shim shichu kula ksheira. Those miktzas chachmi ma'ariv said no, that the lashon im shichu kula ksheira means even im shichu kula, and it started off originally from being kula mayim shuv. Halacha yud, make shamim or make she'uvim shehoyu misarvim b'chotzer. You have until now we're talking about a case where you already had make shamim, and you put into those make shamim mayim shuvim. Now you have make shamim mayim shuvim that they were mixing in the chutzner. In other words, you have a flow of water of mayim shuvim, and you have a flow of water of make shamim, and they're mixing in. And v'nimshachen v'yerdin l'ukesh b'chutzner, and they're coming down into a hole in the chutzner. Oy shemis arvin al mailis amayir, they're mixing on the steps of going down into a mayir, which is also a bear, and v'yerdin l'mayir. Is imreiv min kosher, imreiv min apostle, and the reason for it is because it's hamshacha. Because since over here there's the hamshacha, in other words, you're being mamshech, the rainwater, even the mayim shuvim are being nimshach al gabi akarka, they're not going directly into the mikvah. So therefore, if the reiv is min kosher, it's kosher. Mechzel l'machzeh is possible. Ein masai, when is this din? Bizman shemis arvin actually gil mikvah. In other words, they got together even before they were gil mikvah. And over here we say that if it was reiv min kosher, it's beseder. And if reiv min kosher, kosher. Misarvin she'arvin actually gil mikvah. V'nimshachn v'yerdim. Aval imhoyu haksherim v'apsulim mikalchen. In other words, you didn't have that the water, the rainwater and the kosher water were mixing together. The ksherim and the psulim were mikalchen l'techa mikvah. They were going directly into the mikvah. In other words, you had kosher water being poured into the mikvah, and you had mikveh, which is mayim shuvim being poured into the mikveh. They weren't nischol al gabi karka. So over here it depends. Im yodua shenafel l'teich arboim soy mayim ksherim. Actually, yard l'teich shleishul lugam mayim shuvim kosher. Vim lav pasul, because over here, since the water went directly into the mikveh, there was no amshach al gabi karka. Again, by amshach al gabi karka, so if it's reiv ksherim, it's beseder. Mashenkin, if there's no amshach al gabi karka, it was going directly into the mikveh, so you have to find out. If lepel in the mikveh there was 40 saw, before 3 saw of mayim shuvim fell in, so then it's kosher. Mashenkin, if there's 3 lugim of mayim shuvim that fell into this mikveh before that there was arboim saw of mayim ksherim, so mele it comes out. So it caused the mikveh to be puzzle, and then even though there's more mayim ksherim comes, that's not going to help because lepel the mikveh already became puzzle, like we'll learn in the Hemshech.